Morning, everyone. Yeah, it's been an amazing 6 days of doing this every morning. We started last Thursday, and we had a topic every morning: Thursday, Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and today we think we're gonna close this by doing the Q&A. It's been really successful. I was just sharing we had between 70 and 100 people every day attending these morning shows that that we're doing. And yeah, today we're just going to close, with some Q&A. Doesn't have to be all the answers from us. So please, if you feel that you've got good insights, share them in the chat as well. We don't know what we're going to be doing from now on. The team's going to reconvene later this afternoon. I'm sure, more and better ideas will come up to keep the community connected and helping more businesses move to this remote way of working. So yeah, do you want to share some logistics, Martin, and
Yeah,
how
sure.
we're going to do it?
Yeah, sure. So if you go to the Q&A at the bottom, that's where you can pop your questions in. We've had a couple of questions come into us separately by email or from yesterday, so we're going to kick off with those. If you want to chat, as Eduardo said, if you have any comments that you have to add to the questions that are asked, just use the chat function and make sure your drop down says that it goes to attendees, so that everybody in the webinar can see what you're saying as well. So we've got people that we've seen all week today. So we've got Kayo, who talked to us about keeping the work moving. We're missing Lisa this morning. She had to be with a client this morning, but Kayo thinks he can also help us if we have questions about tools and techniques that Lisa covered. We've got Joe and Rich, who talked to us about staying connected. We've got Bea, who talked to us about culture and values. Eduardo, of course, talked to us about leadership, and thanks to Cassandra for coming back. She talked to us about nourishing your well-being. All of the webinars had a great response, and we had some great comments and questions, and this is our opportunity to take it a bit further. So I wouldn't mind kicking off with the first question that we had come in via email. It said, I would love to hear your thoughts or ideas of how you can maintain engagement and morale for essential staff that need to be on site. We're an essential service, so these people are required to come in, but we can already see it having an effect on them. Rich looks like he's going to talk.
Yeah, maybe I'll start. I was thinking about this question last night, and I think there's two perspectives we can take. The first is to consider that the people who are remaining at work at this point in time might feel like they're survivors. In the inverted commas, the good old days when we would organisations did retrenchment, there were survivors and those people who got the chance to leave. So I was thinking about this last night and wondering to what extent some of the people who are staying might feel like they're the survivors of this change. And if that's the case, then thinking about the 5 stages of grief, or the 6 stages of grief might be useful. So Diana Kubler-Ross, this is foundations of psychology. There's denial, it's not happening, which we've all kind of been through. Then the anger of why is this happening? Then bargaining, if I just do the right thing, then maybe it'll all be okay. And then a sense of apathy or giving up, and then acceptance. The next step from there is meaning. And one of the things I think we can do now with teams that are staying is actually help them with a specific and special purpose as a collective. What is their purpose in staying on site? How do they create the conditions for everybody else to also be able to come back to work? So it's a purpose, not just the organization's purpose or their everyday team purpose. It's what is their really important role now in creating opportunities for people who aren't at work to stay connected with work, to have a workplace to come back to when this crisis is over. So I'd spend a bit of time with the people who are on site, helping them formulate a reason for being there beyond just keeping the lights on. It's more than that. They're really important. The other thing to do is making sure that they're deeply connected with people who are not at work. Having them really feel like, even though they're on site, we're actually we're all working virtually. So they're connected as a team to the broader team who are working from home. And they have a really specific and critically important purpose for being in the workplace right now. It's creating opportunities for people to come back to work.
Nice. Thanks, Rich. We also had another question come in. Sorry, I'm flicking screen so I can read it, which was, I think, related to the leadership discussion that we had yesterday. So what we have here is, how do you convince the old hierarchical management levels that this flutter-based approach to teams development is in the company's and ultimately their best interests, even though they may lose their current role and have to change again on the next cycle?
I think there is that piece of agility of getting, moving the work and getting the work done. So I think influencing that leader to think about, if we flatten the structure, we might be able to get to the outcomes and what you're trying to achieve a little bit faster, versus having, layers of decision making and layers of processes that might actually get in the way of getting the work done in a challenging time. I think there might be a way of influencing. Of course, in my mind, all I wanted to say is they have no choice, because they will have to move a little bit faster, they'll have to adapt, they'll have to change. But I know that's no way of influencing someone saying you have no choice. So I think really going about how to get the work moving quicker and how to get to the results that they want to achieve and the organization ultimately want to achieve with their vision. I think that's the ultimate way of, influencing that leader, talking about, the outcomes and even the outputs for that particular leader, if that's helpful as well. So keeping the work moving, removing any constraints and layers that actually might get in the way to achieve the agility during times of change and uncertainty. I think that's a really good way of influencing, but I'm sure there will be other opinions here.
Yeah, I'd love to build on what you just mentioned then, Bea. All those points were, super amazing. And I think whenever you are trying to influence or negotiate or try to get someone to see your view of the world, what you really have to do is use a bit of empathy and put yourself in their shoes. So oftentimes if you're talking to a board or a CEO, they've got a million different things going on, probably dealing with coronavirus and restructuring. And a lot of times what we can make the mistake of doing is coming to them with our view of the world and saying, oh, this would be great for engagement. And for example, they might not be too concerned about engagement right now if they're losing millions of dollars or something like that. So when you are going to influence a leader, really put yourself in their shoes and try to figure out what's important to them, and then have a think about, well, how can agile ways of working or a flatter team structure benefit them? So it might be able to, save money, we can launch new things, be more innovative. So really, when you are influencing someone, try to put yourself in their shoes and empathize with their worldview and figure out what's important to them and lead with that.
Martine, I've got something I can add, if that's okay.
Go for it, please.
Because I've spent 20 years working in big multinational businesses, and I've spent the last few years being a coach and being trained as a coach. And I really wish I knew what I know now as an accredited coach back when I was trying to influence all the leaders and colleagues I worked with over those 2 decades. Man, my life would have been so much easier. And one thing that I'm learning a lot is about these kind of dimensions of our thinking, and that we all have a natural tendency to perhaps be at the extreme of these dimensions. And one of these dimensions is the dimension of control versus trust, empowering versus needing to control things, centralized versus decentralized model, whatever you want to call that continuum between an individual who says, I need to control, versus the other end of that scale, which is an individual that says, I trust people until they prove themselves, untrustworthy. And I know that I'm a servant leadership in this capacity, and my job is to support and empower others. There's that dimension. And I'm not suggesting that it's possible to coach your manager or coach your colleagues, but what I have come to realize is there's a couple of powerful questions you can ask that tries to understand or help someone get more awareness, as Rich said, you know, getting to that final stage of awareness. Because when we have awareness of our cognitive tendencies and the parts of our thinking that is quite fixed, we can then realize, well, actually, does it serve me to always be fixed at this extreme of this dimension, the need to control? You know, what might it mean if I could actually get into the middle ground and I can be discerning in this moment? Do I need to control or do I need to trust and empower? So getting someone into the center of that dimension. And by asking questions like, you know, I'm sensing that control is really important to you. Can you tell me a bit more about your desire to control and what that means to you? And digging a little bit to try to understand, what does it mean to this individual to need to be in control? And I'm not suggesting you be a therapist or a coach to your boss. I know that's not appropriate. But if you can help that person start asking themselves and do their own personal inquiry about, when did I start to need to control? What does it mean to me to be out of control? And often these programmings of our thinking come back to our early childhood, and we're behaving essentially like 5-year-olds in a grown-up world, really stuck in these really limited, fixed ways of thinking. So there's just something I wanted to offer up. How do you help that own person get their own insights that I am quite fixed in this dimension? And what would it mean? What would I be without this belief that I need to be in control? Who would I be as a leader if I was able to let go of this belief and be more adaptive to the circumstances, you know, moment by moment, whether you need to control or empower rather than being fixed at the extreme?
Thanks, Cassandra. We did have another question that came in via email that could be an extension of what you're saying, or others might like to contribute an answer as well. And it is about maybe connected to that piece of control. So it is about, how do you keep your team productivity in a consistent basis? Is it recommended to send daily updates about their productivity? Does it feel like you don't trust them or create anxiety to them under the current situation? We talked a lot about leadership yesterday. Eduardo, you might have something to say about this question.
Someone externally was asking me about this as well. Another business owner that links with many other businesses. She said to me, a lot of CEOs are asking me, they worry about productivity. How can I keep my teams being productive? And I've been thinking about it, and I think all these crises that we're living, all this moment that we're living, you might have that silver lining moment that people, CEOs, leaders are going to realize that we're going to have to change the way we think and experience work. And that the old, 19th century or 20th century, way of working, micromanaging, managing by KPIs and numbers are probably not what's going to take them where it took us as a society, 100 years ago. Many companies have already and are having a more human, trustful, purposeful, way of working. And these companies are the ones that are not feeling that change right now. The ones that are feeling the pain right now are the ones probably that we're still stuck, in last century's ways of working. So to me, it requires almost like a paradigm shift for these leaders and for these organizations to realize that they need a different way of thinking about the work and experiencing the work on those organizations. Of course, they need things like the right tools, the right technology. They also need the right systems of work. But the one thing that they need, in my mind, is that shift in a mindset that, it's better to trust your people. It's better to leave the freedom for them to come up with the outcomes when they feel they need to come up. All these things that people like us and other businesses out there have been banging on for years and years. So I think maybe now, there is a reason for change for companies to think about work differently.
So I might just build on that really briefly. It has me think about a book called One from Many by Dee Hock, who was the founder of Visa Corporation. And he spoke about what is the role, what is a leader managing, was the question. And he said, in a traditional organization, managers manage down. But he said, Visa, when he created Visa, he said, leaders manage up. So my job as a leader is to manage my boss's expectations and their focus. If I have any time left after I do that, my job is to manage my peers, help my peers get clear about how we all align and what we're doing together. And if I have any time left, which I won't, I might manage down. I think this is the flip on the philosophy here is my job as leaders isn't to manage down, it's to manage up. And in the case of the most senior leaders, this is managing the future. It's creating the future and seeing the future and connecting our peers with the future. And then everything else takes care of itself from there.
And Rich, is there any support that leaders can get? You know, as Eduardo was talking about, this is the time to shift the thinking, but it's not easy to shift thinking like overnight.
This is really important because right now we have to really think about what is our paradigm we're in. Actually, we're in a paradigm of an interconnected world, regardless of whether we've got working from home. The world of work is interconnected and it's global. The approaches need to not be just top down, they need to be more organic, sideways. That means that each person in the organization needs to reimagine the value they create or the role they play. You know, for senior leaders, they need to reimagine their role as being the seekers of emergent or the seekers of possible futures, not maintenance of the current reality. And then we need to resource our leaders to work this way. You know, this is giving them the tools they need and enabling them to do that. I think this is a really amazing time. We have the possibility of becoming way more anticipatory about what the future could be right now, not just trying to maintain what is.
Okay, Sandra, you're going to say something before.
Yeah, I just love that conversation. So powerful, so needed, right? You know, one of my favorite books is a book called Why We Work by Barry Schwartz. And Barry says we basically design human nature by designing the institutions in which we work. And for almost 300 years now, we've been treating humans like robots. And so now is the time to shift gears, you know, from optimizing headcount to inspiring heart count. And we need a completely different leadership paradigm to do that. And we know that in organizations, when we're being sent messages that we don't trust you, if we give you an inch, we know you're going to take a mile. We know that we actually design people to be worthy of mistrust. We design people to start taking little bits here and there. And so I think we've got to be so careful right now that we don't design a human nature that is not the best of human nature, because God knows we need the best of human nature right now to survive and thrive as a species. So this is a topic I'm so passionate about. I really love that conversation.
Can I just touch? Oh, sorry.
No, Joe, I'm just going to build on something that you said before. You mentioned that empathy is important, and we're mentioning shift of paradigm, shift of mindset, and those three things are interconnected. So when you as a leader think about what do my people need to thrive, what is getting in their way, and you actually put yourself in their shoes, you open up a lot of possibilities to think what they're thinking, to see what they're seeing, to feel what they're feeling, and then from there, what's the environment you have to create so they can thrive? So that's the question you should ask yourself. And Eduardo talked about being vulnerable. So sometimes you're not going to have the answer. So asking them the question as well, what do you guys need? What can we build together? Is a way to be vulnerable, to be with them, and to get there together. So as a leader, you have to put yourself in people's shoes to lead better and to go with them, not just for them, but with them.
Amazing, Ko. I just wanted to touch on a personal story that I think might be helpful. That was amazing stuff on kind of the mindsets of leadership and the shift that we might need. And then on the tactical side, there was the question of, you know, how often should you be checking in? And I know for myself, when I joined the Agile Lab, and I went from an office role where I was there 9 to 5 every day, had a manager telling me what I should be doing, when lunch is, all that type of thing. And then I did a complete shift where I was sitting at home and Eduardo and Martin and Bea were like, yep, you're all good. Here's what you need to do for the day. We'll leave you to it. So there's a big shift that takes place there. And it can be really scary to try and motivate yourself. So one thing that you can do as a leader is set a few really clear outcomes, and work with the person saying, you know, what is it that you think you need to be achieving today, and just reduce all the complexity into 3 nice outcomes that you can say, hey, if you knock these off by the end of the day, that's a really successful day. And if you need anything, please reach out. And I know what happened with myself over time, and what I've noticed with other people in the team is right at the start, you might check in a lot more often. The leader might check in, you know, 2-3 times a day. But once you get into that rhythm of checking out those outcomes, the trust starts to build. Then you get to the point where Martine's like, hey, you all good to go off and run this whole project? Yeah, great, awesome. Let me know if you need anything. So it does start to build over time. So right now you might need to check in a little bit more often, see if everyone's going okay, see how they're tracking. But as it starts to develop, the trust starts to build. You'll have to check in less and less, and a really, really nice bond of trust and accountability starts to build within the team.
I think now I ask Joe what I'm doing for the day. Totally changed. I wanted to flip around and ask Kaio a question, actually, because Kaio is doing a lot of work with teams remotely right now. Our clients, we're helping remotely, and you're seeing a lot of it happen live, Kaio. So are there any things that you're seeing that people in those teams are asking you? What are you hearing, and what's your tips for them?
Yeah, usually when we get big teams around physical walls to discuss, conversation goes well. But when those big teams, like around 30 people, move to online, new ways of chatting, new ways of communicating with each other, they're struggling with that. So what I've been doing with them and the conversations we've been having is now everyone has to really be accountable for it and prepare for when we're going to catch up. So we're setting up some time before we catch up for people to update their things, look at their work, plan their day, and think about, okay, what do I need to share with my team so I can be short, sharp, and straight to the point. And this is getting them massive results, especially with 2 big clients that we're working with, like around 30 people. But what about you guys? Have you been facing this challenge with big teams as well in the clients you're working with and in the companies you're working with, and how you dealing with that?
Yeah, I have been as well, Kaio. So just briefly, I've got a team that's about 20 people right now, and it's actually Skype. The online video cameras can't cope with it with that many people. So
Yeah,
we're actually running 4 teams of 5 versus 1 team of 20, and where 1 member of each team is also in another team stand-up. So we're running 4 smaller cycles, actually, but people are attending multiple stand-ups, so they're able to cross-pollinate between those subgroups as a way of trying to chunk things down.
Yeah, dividing and conquering is a good strategy as well. For some
Mate,
teams, it might be a bit harder. So, for example, when you get like program level, sometimes you want everyone attending as well. So you want to have that open forum for everybody. But if all of the 30 people will have their voice, probably it's not going to be short and sharp. So we need to change the dynamic somehow.
Yeah. So we've done with another group that we pose a question, and everyone in the Google Doc is actually making a response to that question prior to the meeting, like a key strategic question.
Yeah.
And everyone has a chance to respond and get their thoughts in order. And then in that actual session, we're talking about implications of responses versus actually what the first thought is.
Yeah. So the prep is needed.
Yeah.
For me, like it varies so much. Like one particular client is really keen to learn and change and evolve their practices. Another one, I just had a conversation yesterday, and the whole organization is a little bit like not sure what's happening because the exact team is not communicating anything virtually. So we discuss ways forward, for the exact team to potentially, communicate more, create some rhythms and put some things in place like we discussed during the webinars. And then others that, are very fortunate to have already done remote working before and understand the power of communication, understand the power of the tools and the rhythms and all of that. And then with that particular organization, all I had to do was remind someone that, one person leaves alone, someone I've been helping, and, that person might be feeling a little bit more unsupported now. So those people living alone need more support, during these days.
Nice, thank you. There was a question weaved in amongst other questions that I didn't quite touch on, and I might ask Cassandra this one if that's okay. It's how do you coach remotely?
Yeah, really effectively, actually. All of my clients are now remote, and many of my clients have always been remote. And I think you coach remotely pretty much the same way as you coach in person. Sometimes I'll use kind of physical steps or exercises with post-it notes or other visualizations that involve moving your body when I'm in person. I've got to adapt those types of specific techniques that I draw on in the specific challenges. But you can absolutely coach remotely. And I've seen dramatic shifts in my clients through conversations just like the one we're having today via video conference. So you coach the same way as you do in person. But actually, what I find is we're more likely to get a breakthrough, because often when you're sitting in the office environment, in a boardroom, and I've had lots of times when I've been with a client in a boardroom or in a meeting room in the office environment, and there's this hesitancy to really go where you need to go in a coaching conversation, often back to some of those, the way that we programmed our operating system way back. And often there's tears when you have a breakthrough in a really effective coaching conversation. There's a lot of people who just have a block and don't want to go there at work. So what I'm hoping is that I see more of my clients actually have significant breakthroughs in understanding their patterns of thinking and the beliefs that sit below their level of consciousness, and are able to transform their mindset and transform their leadership because they're in the comfort of their own home. So fingers crossed it's only going to get even more powerful.
Thanks, Cassandra. We're right on time here, but I do want to, we're recording it as well, so we'll keep this going. One last question for each of you. I'll go around in kind of maybe the order that I've got to help you navigate. What's your one last tip for working remotely, your best tip that you've got to share? We'll go Eduardo, Kaio, Joe, Rich, Cassandra, Bea.
I'll say for me, both if you're a leader or even if you're not a leader, be very present and be very available for the people in your team. That would be my tip.
My tip will be, don't forget that people are visual, either physically or remotely. So share, visualize. If you have something on your mind, put it down, share with everyone, so everyone can see what you're seeing and think exactly what you're thinking.
Yeah, mine will be to balance work with non-work. When we work from home, we can tend to have work on 24/7. I've got this amazing jigsaw I'm working on right now. I try and spend 20 minutes every couple of hours trying to find that damn red piece I can't seem to find right now. So balance work and non-work.
Was it me next? My tip would probably be continuing on the thread of empathy. Is just really empathize as both leader and team members of, the leaders are at home they're stressing out about how they can manage their team from home. And then the team members at home stressing how they can get all of their work done. So just make sure you've got those points in to communicate with each other, empathize with each other, and set some clear outcomes and celebrate when you achieve those, and just take it day by day.
My turn? So for me, it's about bringing no cherished outcomes. They say expectations are disappointments waiting to happen. So I'm moment by moment making sure I'm bringing no cherished outcomes. I'm just holding things lightly because things are changing minute to minute, hour by hour, and most of these changes are out of our control. So the more we cling to what we hope is going to happen this hour, this minute, this day, the less we cling, the less we suffer. So bringing no cherished outcomes is really my mantra at the moment.
It's difficult to have another tip now. No, I think there is something about being okay to let go and unlearn a few things that we've been very used to. It's all right to not be right and to not know what to do. So this is the time to unlearn, rethink, and question what remains, what we adapt, and what we keep.
Nice. Thank you all. I am going to share a kind of a tip. I'm going to say this is our time to help each other. So we're trying to help you, and maybe you can help the people around you by sharing what we've shared. We're recording these webinars. They're available on our website. Connect with us on LinkedIn. Maybe if you learnt something, you can help others by sharing what we've shared with them. So thank you all for coming along. We'll hopefully see you again soon, but that's our last one for now. Thanks, everyone.
See everyone.
Thanks everyone for coming. Thank you.